speaking about is we're going to be continuing to speak about. My funny thing is trying to get the live and the recorded, so we're good. So what we're going to speak about is the Sefirat HaOmer, is the counting of the Omer. So something that was discussed last week and has been discussed for the previous number of weeks. This concept of the counting of the Omer, the concept of counting the Omer literally means the counting of the sacrifice, which is called the Omer. It's the sacrifice of the Omer that was brought up on the 16th of Nisan. And there's a famous statement by the Alter Rebbe, by the Baal HaTanya, that he said like this. He said that we don't just count on Sefirat HaOmer, but Hasidim always count, referring to people, people who are connected, who are conscious. They constantly count. It's not just counting during the count of the Omer, but it's constantly counting. Now, there's literally a wealth of information that we could delve into in the Sefirat HaOmer. But just for those of us that are not aware of what Sefirat HaOmer is, I'm just going to quickly just give a brief overview of what Sefirat HaOmer is. And then what I want to focus on today is specifically the midah that we are in, the Sefira that we are in this week. So this is going to be a two-part series. The Sefira that we're in this week, which is Netzach, and next week's Sefira, which is called Hod. So before we do that, I just want to give a quick overview of what the Sefirat HaOmer is all about. So Sefirat HaOmer is the time, okay, that we count. It's the number of days that the Jewish people counted after coming out of Egypt. So after coming out of Egypt, they started to count. Now, why did they count? Because they were counting towards something. And according to one opinion, the opinion of the Ran, who's a famous, it's called a Rishon, a medieval rabbi, lived in Spain, I believe. He said, why did they count? So the reason for the counting is because they had this desire to come to receive the Torah. So when you count toward, you want to count towards the summer, for example. So you're counting down the days. So when you finally have the summer there. So that's what he says. The counting was from coming out of Egypt until receiving the Torah, and that was this process of 49 days. Now, 49 is a very significant number. Why is 49 a very significant number? Because 49 is, right, easy math. 7 times 7. Now, 7 times 7 is a very special number. Why is 7 times 7 a very special number? Because 7 is a special number, right? We say lucky 7. So in Kabbalistic thought, the number 7 represents the 7 Sefirot, and it represents a sense of wholeness, of completeness. Now, we know that there's 7 days of the week. There's the 7 oceans, there's 7 continents, and the Talmud says that there's seven heavens, right? Some say that cats even have 7 lives, right? But I don't know if that relates to anything. But the number 7 represents the number of completeness, right? So we have 7 days of the week. Why is it 7 days of the week? So the Zohar says because the 7 days of the week correspond to the 7 Sefirot. So Sunday corresponds to chesed, to kindness. Monday corresponds to gvura, corresponds to discipline, to strictness, right? Which is actually very, very interesting because we kind of sense that, on a Sunday, we're like, oh, great, it's still the weekend, not in Israel, really, but it's the weekend and we feel like this sense of like relaxation and whatever because we're coming out of Shabbat. And then Monday, it's like, you're back in the swing of things, back in the work week. So that's gevura, that's discipline. Tuesday is the idea of tiferet, the idea of kitov, double keto where everything is kind of like comes together. We have Sunday and Monday. And then that leads to Tuesday, that's Tiferet. And then Wednesday is already corresponds to Netzach. That corresponds to fortitude. Right? Thursday corresponds to Hod. Friday is Yesod, is foundation. And then Shabbat is Malchut, which is why the whole motif of Shabbat is Lecha Dode Likat Kala. It has to do with the bride, and it has to do with the Shabbat Malkita, with the queen. And what is the idea of the Eshet Chaya? The whole idea is the idea of the feminine. It's the idea of Shabbat being corresponding to the totality of the 7 days of the week, which is Malchut. So God willing, we'll get to Malchut as we get there. So these 7 Sefirot have within them corresponding individual Sefirot. So we have the 7 Sefirot, but within each Sefira, we also count the particulars. We count the detail, which is why the mitzvah of the counting of the Omer is not just to count the week. So we don't just say today is the 3rd week of the Omer, it's the 4th week of the Omer, and we suffice with that. There is an opinion, by the way, in Halakha that from the Torah, that Sefirat HaOmer is not from the Torah nowadays. It is a rabbinic mitzvah, right, to count. But counting the days is from the Torah, but counting the weeks is not from the Torah. It's rabbinic. This is an opinion like that's the opinion of Rabbeinu Yerucham, also a Rishon, a medieval rabbi. But when we refer to counting the week, what are we saying when we say that we're counting the week? We're saying that we're counting the general Sefira. So that's in a sense, that is something which is external. Because if I'm saying that I'm working on a certain attribute, for example, the attribute of chesed, of kindness. So if I don't go into the nitty gritty of chesed and what makes my chesed work and tick, so then I'm not really fixing it. If I'm just thinking about chesed, I'm thinking about kindness, and I'm thinking that I got to work on it, I'm not really fixing it. So here comes this concept of the 49, because the 49 is the 7 times 7. So the 7 individual Sefirot are embarked, so to speak, and they're individualized within the general Sefira of that week. Okay, so now let's get to this week's Sefira. So this week we're working on the Sefira of Netzach. So now Netzach literally means victory. It's the attribute of victory. So but before we delve into this, and we're going to need next week also to delve probably just into Netzach. We're trying to Netzach and Hod go hand in hand with each other. So I'm going to kind of like refer to Hod, which is the next week's Sefira, together with Netzach, and I'll tell you why. So we started off with the first week, the second week, and the third week. Right now we're on the 4th week. What are these 3 weeks all about? The first 3 weeks correspond to Chesed, Gevura, and Tiferet. That means kindness, discipline, and the harmony between them. So in Kabbalistic thought, that has to do, they're called the Ikar Hamidot. They're called the main aspects of the Midos, the main aspect of the emotions. If we think about what is really emotions is either you have an intense emotion for kindness or for love, or an intense emotion for fear, which is discipline, the opposite, right? The polar opposite. And they are the main emotions that make a human tick, right? Tiferet is the harmony between the two, right? It's taking the chesed and it's taking the gevura and finding the balance within the two. Now that was last week. Right now we're on the week of Netzach, with fortitude, right? With victory. Now, how does that come into the equation? So it goes like this. After a person recognizes, and it could sometimes start with intellectually, and we want things to start intellectually because from the side of kedusha, from the side of holiness, things have to come from an organized source, and the organized source is the intellect. And according to Kabbalah, the intellect is called father and mother, right? And the father and mother, Chachma and Bina, father and mother, now give birth to children. And what are children over here? Children are the emotions, right? Children usually don't have the maturity and the intellect to be able to, make important decisions on their own, and they need their parents to help them, maneuver through those early years. So the emotions of a person are also like that. The emotions of a person are like the children that are born because of a realization that is conceived in the mind, with a connection between the intellect, two parts of the intellect, which come, which give birth to the emotions. Now, the emotions are called ze'er anpin. They're called small face. Why are they called small face? That's what ze'er anpin means. Why is it called small face? Because a child got a small face. It could look exactly like the parent, and you're like, "Wow, I know that's your kid because you have the same face." But it's a small face, a miniature, it's a mini you, right? And that's basically that's also the midot. The midot are small face of the intellect. The intellect now recognizes and understands things on a major scale, and the emotions relate to it on a small scale because they don't have the intellect to fuel the emotions as much as the intellect does. So, but nevertheless, it's called small face. Now this is all as a form of an intro to understand what Netzach is, because you've got the intellect, now you've got the emotions, and now what else is missing? What is missing now is the maneuvering and the actually drawing down this emotion, which was stemmed from the intellect, down into the concrete, down into the practical. So this week, next week, and the week after, we start a process of being very practical, of now transfer the emotions into practice, into action. So let's try to understand Netzach deep in a deeper way. So we're going to look into a couple of concepts of what Netzach is this week. Next week, probably is going to be more. So according to the Kabbalistic sources, Netzach relates to Netzach. Okay, what does Netzach mean? Forehead. Okay, now you may ask yourself, what does that mean, first of all? And Netzach is with a nun, and Metzach is with a mem. So how does that relate, right? So what is a forehead? Okay, so forehead is basically, it's the bone, a part of the skull of that stores the brain, basically. What does that have to do with Netzach? I mean, Netzach is supposed to be fortitude, it's supposed to be practice. Well, what does that mean? So it's explained as follows: that what does it mean that the forehead of a person is like the Netzach, is like the aspect of Netzach. Okay. The brain is stored within the skull, but the brain needs the skull, and the skull of the person is the external aspect of the brain, right? In other words, the person doesn't think with their forehead, but he thinks with the brain. But the way the concept comes down, and the way the concept becomes crystallized, is that it finds the channel within the human brain, which is stored within the skull, right, through the forehead. And that's why actually many Kabbalists, and there's, according to the Arizal, there's actually a whole way of looking into somebody's background, and not just background, we're talking about different reincarnations by looking at their forehead. Don't worry, I don't know how to do this. But there are certain Kabbalists, for example, there's stories about the Arizal that, people were walking past them. We're right over here in this holy city of Tzfat, and the Arizal looked at them and he said, "You wicked one, you wicked one." And he's like, he almost wanted to bury himself from shame. It's like, what's going on? And the Arizal told him, 2 reincarnations earlier, you stole and you did this, and it was never fixed. And by embarrassing him, what the Arizal did is that he helped fix that sin that was done 2 reincarnations earlier, just by looking at the forehead. Because the forehead holds within it basically what the brain is and what the consciousness is, but it's hidden. And that is the concept of Netzach. The Netzach does not have the intellect within it, but what it does have is it has the practical aspect of the intellect. Now, what the intellect decided upon, and the emotions felt, and now it comes down into action. So according to Kabbalah, right, there's 2 ways of understanding Netzach. It's interesting. What am I looking at over there? And then Netzach. There's that sign over there. It says Netzach. It's very funny. Yeah. So there's 2 Kabbalistic quotations as to what Netzach is. One quotation is that Netzach is a byproduct of Ima. Now this is I'm just going to say it, and then I'll try to explain it. Nihi de Ima. Okay. Now what does that mean? Nihi de Ima. Nihi de Ima means Netzach Hod Yesod of Ima, which is what's Ima again. That is the concept of Bina. So Netzach,
like
mother, right? That's Bina. So now how this works in Kabbalah is that there is, it's called Seder Hishtalshelut, that the world of the Sefirot, but also the 4 worlds and everything within it is Seder Hishtalshelut. The most Hishtalshelut comes from the word Shalshelet. Shalshel is a ring. And it's a ring that's connected to a ring, that's connected to a ring, that's connected to a ring. So it all connects to a level which is higher than it. This is called the Seder Hishtalshelut, the down chaining of light, of consciousness, of the world, the Sefirot. So when we say that Nehi of Ima, that Netzach Hod Yesod of Ima now gives birth to Netzach, it means that the byproduct of the intellect of Ima, of the Bina, now governs, right? That the shishtalshelut of that is of it being Netzach. Yeah. That the byproduct of Netzach Hod Yesod of Ima, of the concept of Ima, of the Bina, the level of Bina, in other words, its lower aspect of Bina, leads to to Netzach. In other words, that is the root of Netzach. Okay, that's one way of looking at it. Now, it's found in other Kabbalistic sources that the root of Netzach comes from Keter de Tiferet of Ima. Okay, what does that mean? Keter means the crown of the aspect of Tiferet, which means harmony of that is within Bina, within understanding. And that is the root of Netzach. In other words, there's two sources, according to Kabbalah, as to where Netzach, what is the root of Netzach? Is it the Nehi of Ima? Is it Netzach Hod Yisod of Ima? Or is it the Keter, the crown of the Tiferet of Bina? Okay, now let's try to understand this. And what is the difference? What is the difference between the two? So it's explained that the difference between the two is as follows. Netzach means that I am not feeling the emotion necessarily behind the action that I'm doing, or the intellect for that matter as well. And what I'm doing right now is I'm kind of like just going along with a decision that was made and an emotion that was felt. And now my action is to carry through. I've made a decision to, I don't know, exercise every day, or made a decision not to eat certain foods. And I'm sticking to that. Now it depends from where that decision was made from. What's the source of this decision? If the decision came from intellect, so then if the intellect isn't there and the emotion isn't there, then who's to say that I will not regress and I will not, won't follow through on my decision that I made? Because it's almost like taking what it is, it's basically the animal soul that is now being governed by the intellect. So when the animal soul it has the inspiration, so to speak, or it has the intellect in front of it, so then it could carry through. But once the intellect is not there, the emotion isn't there, so then the animal soul is not obligated to stick to those rules anymore, to those realities.
How would you say it's coming from emotions instead of intellect in this language?
How is it only emotions again? How is it?
I understand the part that it's not from intellect, but what do you mean? How is it if it's not from emotions? What phrase would you use?
If it's not
only from emotion.
Right, so it started from the intellect.
If it didn't,
but then
you said it didn't. Somebody makes a decision, it's emotion, from his emotion, not from his intellect.
Right, so that is actually nothing.
Oh,
that's not even Netzach, because that could be like a day or an hour. Making decisions based on emotions is not even considered anything, because those you're totally not bound by, because another emotion is going to come by, and another emotion, whatever.
You're only bound by it comes to the next. I was wondering.
Right. I mean, these are like, people have like New Year resolutions and like, okay, do this. Okay, yeah, I'm gonna do that, and that's it. That it doesn't. But if it stems from Nehi de Ima, if it stems from the Ima, the idea of the Bina, of the intellect, so then there is some consistency to the Netzach. However, it is still limited and it's still external. Why is it still external? Because if the intellect is not there, then I may not carry through any longer. But looking at the other explanation in Kabbalah, which it stems, Netzach stems from Keter of Tiferet of Bina. So if it stems from Keter of Tiferet of Bina, so then So then it's way different. What do I mean by that it's way different? Because it stems from keter, from crown. Now what is crown, what is keter all about? Crown means is a AKA crown stands for willpower. And willpower is the highest or one of the highest parts of the person, having will, right? It's even higher than intellect, will. It's actually will and pleasure actually are the two highest levels that correspond to crown. Ratzon and Tainug. So the willpower. So when a person, when the intellect is now governed by my will, so then which is what that Kabbalistic statement is, that it stems from the keter of Bina, basically. It's the crown of Bina. It's not just the Bina working, but it's the crown which is above it. That means that right now, what is fueling my emotion? It's my will. So if it's my will, nothing will stop me. And that's true victory. That's true nitzachon. Because I decided to do this, and I don't care if people are standing in the way. I don't care if there's a truck in the way. It doesn't matter. If I made that decision, and that decision came from my will, from keter, from ratzon, right? So then it's going to carry through. And that's the correlation between Netzach and Netzach on a deeper level. Because what goes on the head? The crown, right? So we could look at the Netzach at the forehead as being external, and it is external to the intellect. But yet, what goes on the forehead or around the forehead and beautifies the forehead, right, is the crown of the king or queen, right? And they have this crown. And that's the idea that Netzach connects to will, ratzon, because that's what crown corresponds to. It's when the king, just by putting on that crown, the king could do anything that he wants, because he's got the authority to bypass all laws and amendments, and just he could just do it, right? Just carry forth. Right. So now that leads us to the second aspect of what Netzach is, and that is that Netzach, there's a statement by the Frierdiker Rebbe, by the previous Rebbe of Chabad, that he wrote in a very, very famous ma'amar, very famous Hasidic discourse, which is called Bati Lagani, I came to my garden. And this is kind of like his, almost it's like his tzava'ah, like his will, right? And he left. That was the last thing that he wrote. And it's amazing like discourse, incredible. I mean, just really 20 chapters of a handbook for basically how to live these last couple of years of galus, last couple of years of exile. That's really what goes on in this ma'amar by the Frierdiker Rebbe. But the last couple of chapters, he kind of switches gears and he talks all about Netzach. And he says that this last generation, basically these last couple of years over here that we have in exile and galus, and says that there's a tremendous potential. Why is there tremendous potential? Because the king, and who's the king over here, Hashem, opens up his treasure house. And he says, just go. Just take everything from my treasure house. It's like treasure houses are open. Why? Because the king wants to win. And when the king wants to win, when there's that will of the king wants to win, money is not an object. Open up the treasure houses, sell this antique, 250-year-old, thing. Just go. So the army has more to fight with. And he says that relates to, in our generation, that relates to our battle. Because our battle in this last generation is almost like, we're like, how are we even like surviving in this last generation? After the Holocaust, he was right after the Holocaust, basically, when he died in 1950. So he says that this last generation, there's tremendous amount of potential, and that potential all comes from Netzach. And what is this treasure house of Hashem? It's the yearns Hashem hi otzaro. It says that the fear of Hashem is Hashem's treasure house. So that means the spreading of the greatness of God, whereas years earlier, in the earlier generations, we would not think of actually opening up like books of Kabbalah and just like, let's say, studying them, or Chassidus, and studying them in like previous generations. Why? Because that's Hashem's treasure house. That's Hashem's like greatest like commodity, right? Is the secrets, it's the gems, and there was this kind of like a ban on the study of inner Torah up until the Arizal, and it's written in the intro of the Arizal's book, says that nowadays it's a mitzvah, and he's talking about in the 1500s, says it's a mitzvah to reveal these secrets. The Arizal saw that as a mitzvah to reveal these secrets, but still the world wasn't like ready to take those Kabbalistic gems of what was written in the books of the Arizal, nor could they properly understand those gems until the advent of the Baal Shem Tov, right, in the Hasidic movement, and the Baal Shem Tov took these gems and packaged them, that it's the gem, it's exactly the gem, but it's just that now it's able to be used and it's able to be accessed. And this went on through all the Hasidic masters, but more specifically in the Alter Rebbe, the Baal HaTanya, where and all the Rebbes that basically there is, right up until the Rebbe basically is taking these gems of Hasidus, taking these gems of and just spreading them all over the world. I mean, you look at what's going on now for example, in Nepal, and there's the Chabad house there that's doing more than any embassy is doing, and the Israeli army is like calling up the Chabad house there. And so what are they doing basically? Well, and I saw an interview on about the shlucha. Her name is Chani Lipschitz, the wife, the Rebbitzin there, and I asked her, what are you doing there in Nepal? You've got kids, like what's happening? So it's a beautiful, beautiful interview where she really views her mission over there as a mission to spread goodness and to spread light and to have a positive effect on the world. And that's exactly what we're talking about over here. Because what would take a couple like that to the other side of the world, to a third world country, and say that we're gonna live here? It's the midah of Netzach, because they know that they have unbelievable powers that's within them that they haven't accessed. They don't know where it came from, and she says that over there. The person who's interviewing her says, "How do you have the strength to do that? You don't have your friends here. You don't have a friend. You don't have your mother. You homeschool your kids. Like, where do you get your strength to give other people strength to be a friend to others, to like 20,000 Israelis that are coming through, right?" So she said, "Hashem gives me strength." This is what she said. Hashem gives me strength to be able to not to think about myself, but to think about the other. And it's such a beautiful concept, and it's a true concept. And this is exactly what the Frierdiker Rebbe was talking about, and kind of the shlichus of the Rebbe of taking this midah of Netzach, and basically you don't understand what's going on in the world, really. The feeling even is not like, the emotions are ups and downs and ups and downs. But what you do have is you've got will. And if you've got will, then you could do it. Then you could survive. Not only you could survive, you could thrive, because you've got the strength you've got the treasures of Hashem. That you want strength? Hashem is saying, no problem, I'll give you strength. Go ahead. You think you don't have strength? You've got all the strength in the world. The treasure houses are open. You think you can't stay up 2 nights in a row? Whatever it is, you could stay up. You think you can't cook for 100 people? You could cook for 100 people. I mean, basically, there's no limits to what we could do. That is the midah of Netzach. It's incredible strength, and according to the Frierdiker Rebbe, this is the highest Sefira in a sense, because it's just like getting the job done without any compromises, and just doing it. So now let's move on to the third aspect of what Netzach is. So we spoke about 2 concepts. We kind of relate one to the other, and we're going to speak about the third concept now. So Netzach on the Kabbalistic chart, I'm just going to pull this up over here in a second so everybody could just see. We've got, yeah, I'm gonna show that. Okay, I'm just going to pull this up over in a second and show it to you. Okay, this is it. Right? This is the tree, right? It's called the tree of life, right? The Kabbalistic tree of life. So if you take a look at the tree of life, so we have something very interesting, because we have right column, left column, and then center column, right? So the right column, we have chokhmah, I like to call it intelligence, not wisdom. And then we have chesed, and then we have benevolence, which is kindness, right? And then we have netzach, and then we have fortitude, right? So this is all right column, right? It's considered the right column. And on the left column, we have bina, we have understanding. We have gevura, strength, right? Or discipline. And then we have hod, which is humility, splendor, acknowledgement. So if we think about this and we would kind of like try to analyze this, how come, what is the connection between chesed and netzach? We think it's actually kind of contradictory, because chesed is kindness, giving, and netzach is like, it's like this strength, endurance, and it's like more of like gevura, right? And it's more of gevura. Whereas also the opposite, gevura, hod, humility, it's seemingly, right? It's more connected to chesed. It's more connected to kindness, because someone who's kind, who's also seemingly humble. So why is it that the chart follows that direction, that correspondence, right? This kind of a chart. This is the. By the way, I just want to point out just one thing. You see here, keter, crown, right? And crown actually precedes chesed, chokhmah, and bina. And actually, there's no dat over here. There's no knowledge or wisdom, because when there's keter, there's no wisdom. There's no dat, because it kind of like jumps over. But when there is dat, there's no keter, because dat is called the small keter, like miniature level of keter is dat, whereas the keter in itself, like undiluted, is called greater level of keter. It's the higher keter. So why is it like that? Why is chesed related to netzach and gvura relating to hod, right? So chesed, there's a verse in Song of Songs. It says, "Nafshi yatsa bedabri bedabri ito," that my soul went out when I spoke to him. And in Song of Songs, that means that there's basically like this. It's like a love story between the Jewish people and Hashem in the Song of Songs, and it says that nafshi yatsa, that my soul went out when I spoke to him, to the beloved, to Hashem over there. And that has to do with communication. So communication, there's a difference between two communicators, right? Depending on what kind of personality trait they originate from, right? The type of communicator that is more of a benevolent, more of a kind person is actually emotional when they communicate, when they speak. Nafshi yatsa bedabrito, my soul goes out. In other words, they're not daunted by the fact that they may be even be losing a sense of like their life power by communicating or getting tired, right? And every good teacher knows that when they need to communicate things, they're just like, it's exhausting, because you're not just giving over information, you're giving over yourself, right? So that's one type of personality. A different type of personality is the personality of strength and of gevura. Personality of gevura, it's like, I don't want to, lose my, give over my energy, right? I want to preserve my energy, preserve my strength. So they're very kind of like, measured in their way of speech and in their way of communicating. So Netzach, so how does Netzach and Hod relate to the personality of Chesed? So the personality of benevolence, of kindness, is when a person is kind, when a person is giving, then he or she wants to argue that point and wants to give over that point until it is actualized, because that's the type of personality that they stem from. They stem from a personality of benevolence, of giving, of going beyond themselves. So they also want to go beyond themselves, not on the emotional level, but also on the practical level, that it should actually be understood. And if there's an argument, let's say, if there's a misunderstanding or there's and that, so then they will actually, kind of like try to enforce the point or debate the point in order for that point to be understood. But where does it come from? It comes from a level of love. It comes from a level of benevolence. Whereas the other personality, the personality of gevura, the personality of strength, of discipline, is very subdued and measured. And their personality is like, I'm not ready to venture out of myself. So that relates to Hod, that relates to humility, because that's what humility is. Hod is the concept that I'm now humble, and I'm listening to you, and I agree that you have a valid point, and I'm agreeing with you. That's what humility is. Humility is looking at the truth and at the validity, right, of each and every person in who they are. I'm not going to argue any points when it comes to Hod, because you have your personality, you're you, and I'm me. So when a personality is gevura, when a personality is strength, so then that person is going to also be measured and subdued in how they will instill their concept, their understandings, and to others. They're not going to do that. They're going to actually listen. They're going to want to take in more than they're going to want to give. So that's the relationship between Chesed and Netzach, and then Gevura and Hod. So next week, please God, we're gonna no, Lag BaOmer is Wednesday night. And so it's a perfect time to have a class on Hod. And it's because it's actually going to be Hod of Hod, which, yeah, you're not, it's a really, you don't want to miss that, because it's Hod Shebahod. The concept of understanding what Hod Shebahod is a very, very profound, and I think of very incredible concept that that is well worth to understand and to delve into. So okay, so we're gonna stop here. So hopefully we opened up a little bit of like insights, a little bit into the sphere of Netzach, and by examining these concepts, we could also, reflect on ourselves and hopefully understand these concepts with how they relate to us intrinsically. So Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom, Rabbi. Thank you. Zakabur.
God Chazak u'Baruch Tieh, Steve. And God willing, we'll see. By you, it'll be Lag BaOmer, and so you're gonna be celebrating Lag BaOmer here in Tzfat.
Oh, the best, the absolute best. Like how much better does it get? That's great.
It is.
Amazing, Rabbi. That's great.
And it's extremely powerful here.
All right. So good. So we really have something to look forward to, guys.
Yes. Okay. Shabbat Shalom. And
Shabbat Shalom, Rabbi. God bless, Rabbi.
And,
great seeing you.
Great to see you. Kol Tuv
Shabbat Shalom. God bless.